I'm Rachel McKenzie. I'm an author and a writer. And I'm coming to you today just to share some thoughts that God has given me throughout my life, throughout my journey, about trust and the power of trust. Trust is something absolutely precious to my heart, especially as one of God's kids, as the beloved of Jesus. And trust is something to me that is very multifaceted, but it's also, God's given me some very cool revelations about what trust is in his kingdom, what it looks like with him as our Father, and even what it looks like with other people. He is so faithful. He is a faithful Father, and in all of what we go through in life, he is incredibly amazing to be with us and to guide us and to lead us. And trust is part of that, because I don't believe that we can really have any kind of relationship with God our Father or with each other without trust. And I mean, when you think about the scriptures on trust, there are so many of them, and the one that almost everybody probably knows really well is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And that is such an incredible promise. But I just wanted to highlight a couple very cool things about trust that he has given me. And I love the Complete Jewish Bible. It's one that I go to all the time because of its kind of more transliteral translation, where it's coming from the root Hebrew words. And I love words, and I love what words mean. And I have discovered something very interesting, probably in the last 3 or 4 years, about the word trust. And in the Jewish Bible, all of the words that are faith in all the other versions, so whenever you read faith, especially in all of Hebrews, where it says, by faith, so-and-so received the promise, that word in the Jewish Bible, in its transliteration from the original language, is trust. And I found that interesting because as you start to research a little bit more about words, you realize that faith is an action word. Faith has something to it that we are responsible for doing. It's something that we can have in greater degrees. I know that, he talks about faith as a mustard seed. If you have that much, if it grows, but faith is an action word, and it requires something from us. And trust is a position. And trust is something that we cannot make happen, but we put our trust in someone or something especially higher. If we put our trust in God, it is our ability to know that he will make it happen. And that it is actually not on us or our ability, but it's all about him. And it's because he is trustworthy. And he's the only one who is 100% trustworthy. The difference between those two words, when you look them up a little bit more, I looked up faith in the original Hebrew. And the word for it actually means to support. So it is an action word. It is something that we can do. It is saying that we are actually believing in God, and we are putting our action behind it by supporting what he says and what he does. I love that. But trust, all of the words that trust means in original Hebrew means to lean on, as if you are being supported by someone, like you're leaning on a friend or you're leaning on a spouse. It means to cling to, and in reference to the vine. And isn't that cool? Because we are grafted in, right? We are grafted into him. Jesus is the true vine. And so the word trust means that we are to cling to, like a vine. And it means to hope. And the word hope there as well is also, it's not a looking forward to something that might happen or hoping and believing that it might happen. It's actually a rooted, firm foundation that it will happen, because if God's behind it, it will. So that's what trust comes down to. And I don't know about you, but trust has been the biggest foundation in my life. It has been what everything else has been based on, for what I've walked out, for what God has revealed to me, for the things that I have lived in. Trust goes back to my very core and essence, way back in my childhood, when I had no reason to trust, because trust is without conditions. Trust is something that we can put in someone like God, and it doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always look like what we think it's going to look like, and it doesn't rely on us for its outcome. It is an amazing, amazing, honestly, tool, but it is a foundation. Trust is about God being who God is, us believing the Word. The Word talks about who God is. Do we believe it or not? Trust is the essence of that. And it's because of his trustworthiness. It's not dependent on our timing. It's not dependent on our ability. And it doesn't have our conditions. It doesn't have our parameters. And trust precedes an action. Usually when you trust, you acknowledge first and then he acts. But what about when it comes to feelings? Feelings are so hard because so often they don't line up. And they don't always come into alignment until later. There's been so many times in my life that I have had to trust God when I didn't feel it. When I didn't feel like he was even trustworthy. When I didn't feel like I had the ability to. Because trust is a choice. Faith is something we have and we can build on. Trust we have to choose. And it goes towards God and it also goes towards people. I remember very distinctly one time in my life when I was really struggling with trusting people. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but when people have disappointed you a lot, when people have let you down, because they will, they're human. We are all human. We are going to fail. But when that is repeated over and over and over again for a lot of our lifetime, it is often very hard to trust people. But my trust in God grew and it expanded. And I realized that trust is a choice. And I remember one day that he told me I can trust people because he is trustworthy, not because they are. And that actually really shifted something for me. And I just wanted to share that story because it had an impact on my life, even in how I viewed people. The amount of trust that I was able to put in God because he is steadfast. He's faithful. He's true. Everything about him is good. That foundation, that rooting, was something I could actually now extend to people, not because they will always be trustworthy. They will still fail. But he never will. And if I trust him, it means I can actually choose to trust people as well. That was huge for me. It actually shifted a lot because I didn't want to trust people. And a lot of us are like that, right? We don't always want to trust people that constantly let us down even. And so it was a shift for me to know that trust is a choice and I can make it because God gives me the ability to make it. They're not always going to come through. They will often disappoint us, I know. But trust is that choice that we can make. And it's interesting to me too that in the Bible, and this relates to other things because we can put trust in things, we can put trust in the world, we can put trust in false things and false gods, we can put trust in idols. And the Bible in Psalms, especially, mostly with David, but all throughout Psalms, is where trust is spoken of most. And it's always in relation to God. And it is always encouraging us that we can trust him because he's trustworthy. Even when we fail, even when circumstances fail, even when he seems far away, it comes back to, again, that God is who he says he is. And if he is trustworthy, we can trust him. And that will secure our future. That will be like Jeremiah 29:11, that he has good for us, that he is going to come through for us. And then the next chapter, right after Psalms, Proverbs, talks about all the cautions about trusting in other things, things that will fail, things like idols, things we place on platforms they should never be on, even people that we place up higher than they are meant to be. And it says all of those things are shaky ground. Proverbs cautions us about trusting in false things, false gods, trusting in the spiritual realm if it's without God, if it's not God. When I look back to my childhood and everything that I was living in, logically there should have been no way that I had the ability to trust God. He had not come through for me yet. He hadn't rescued me. I was still living in darkness. I was still living in trauma and abuse and horror and all kinds of things. And he hadn't come yet, but he kept reminding me that he would. And it was a promise that I kept clinging to. It was like that word that says cling to the vine. It was something I could hold on to. I was leaning on him because somewhere in me knew that he was trustworthy and he was who he said he was. So what he was saying to me must be truth, and one day it would come to pass. And because that was in me at a very, very young age, no matter what I walked through, and it was rocky and it was rough, I knew that God would be there for me. He would see me through. He would walk me through everything. And sure enough, he did. He opened a door that was impossible at the right moment and led me out and into freedom. And because of that kind of foundation, when you have evidence like that, when you have a testimony that speaks of God being exactly who he says he is, then trust grows very firmly. But I want to encourage you today, as we end here, that if trust is a rocky subject for you, if trust is a little bit shaky with God or with people, I want to just bless you with the ability that he gave me at an early age. I want to bless you with a capacity to choose it, because trust is something we can't be without. Trust is our anchor in a storm. It is what will keep our boat firmly planted in those rough waves when they start to knock us about. And if we don't have that, I don't believe we can have our paths go straight and smooth, because if we don't trust God and we don't have that foundation in our relationship with him, then it's almost like he can't act on our behalf. And it's not that God can't do anything. He can, but he wants partnership. He wants relationship. And relationship is not true and real and meaningful if there is no trust. So I just bless you with an expanded capacity to trust in Almighty God, to look into what trust is, to read the scriptures that talk about how we can trust God, especially in Psalms, to be able to allow him to come into the places where trust has been broken, because it will be. There are places in our hearts where trust is fragile. There's places in our hearts and souls where trust is broken. And I will pray that he will come into those places and he will restore the fabric of what trust can be in our lives, and that he will expand on even what I've shared today for you, and that this will keep going in your mind and in your heart throughout the day. Because God is trustworthy. It is who he is. And I bless you with his nature today. I bless you with his trustworthiness. And I pray that his relationship with you and everything he wants to support you with, everything he wants you to cling to him for, will become very tangible and real today and in the days to come. And I thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening. And I pray that these are seeds that go deep and you will think on them again. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the video below. And have an absolutely wonderful day. It is a good day. These are days that are God's, and they're full of his sunshine. So I bless you and I love you guys. Thank you for joining me.